Friend, as you know, we are having discussion on dynamics of contemporary social system and society. We'll try to understand how different forces shape the society and give way to new society. And last few years, we can say in decades, we have witnessed number of forces had come across the society and given a new kind of shape to the present society. So we'll try to understand from a different perspective, social perspective, what are the relations and how the things are changing over the years. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in a studio eminent social science thinker, Professor Anand Kumar. He is a professor of sociology in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and you all know a social activist, and he doesn't believe in sitting idle in the drawing room, but believe in action and also motivate others how and what kind of society we should have. And so he is the right person who will guide us and will help us to understand the contemporary society. So on behalf, I welcome Dr. Anand Kumar for the EduSet lecture on this very topic, dynamics of contemporary Indian society. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Today, we will try to get a profile of the dynamics of contemporary society, where a number of principles of organizing the society are getting interrogated, reformed, and moderated. In Indian society, like any other society, there is a power system, authority structure, and it has certain general principles and some specificities coming out of the history of India, culture of India, civilization of India. There may be many ways of looking at the principles of organizing the Indian social system, but from sociological perspective, we can meet the expectations of understanding if we identify 5 principles, 5 pillars of power structure, which are helping in organizing the social relations and which are subject to change and challenge by those who are not very comfortable in the given structure and system of power relations. What are these 5 principles or pillars of power matrix of our society today? Like any other society, we have a class system which is based upon the economic capacity and rank of various members of society. Obviously, the 2 broad frames could be the rich and the poor. The second principle is very unique and it comes from our tradition. It has some parallels in other societies, but not exactly as it is in India, and it's called caste system. It is birth-based stratification of opportunities, privileges, and prohibitions or discriminations. It is generally believed that caste system is a Hindu religion based system, but in case of South Asia, not only India but whole of South Asia, it is a wrong understanding. You can change your religion, but caste will never leave you. Is like skin of your body. So caste system dominates the social relations within all faith communities of South Asia, particularly in India. The third principle, which has become much more prominent because of continuous awareness building and continuous complaints about its functioning, and that is gender system, where biological differences between man and woman are converted into socio-cultural, political and economic distinctions, and they create gender system of opportunities and, of course, marginalities. The fourth principle of power in contemporary India is again growing out of the process of transformation and the project of nation building, and it is ethnicity. It is based upon cultural identity, and these cultural identities are markers of privileges and discriminations. They are a complex created out of togetherness of region, religion, language, and many other cultural attributes. And the fifth principle of power and opportunities is around religion. India is a secular country according to the Constitution as it was adopted since 1950, but just by constitutional commitment and consensus, we have not become a religion-less society. We are trying to negotiate with the principles of secularism on the basis of our given religious categories and identities. And it has divided India broadly into a majority religion and several minority religions. Majority religion is of Hindus, and minority religions are led by the largest minority religious community, the Muslims, followed by the Sikhs and the Buddhists and the Christians and the Jains and the Jews, and of course such other people who do not belong to any of these classical great religions. Now, the changes which are introduced in our system, which have produced a new kind of dynamism, are from three sources. One is known in our sociological discourse as traditionalization or Sanskritization, borrowing a concept from Professor M. N. Srinivas, a great sociologist who interrogated the nature and character of social change in India around village and caste system. This process of Sanskritization, or a journey from little traditions to great traditions, is a continuous process which creates upward mobility in the cultural realm. The idea of great tradition has been complemented and enlarged by another eminent sociologist, Professor Shamacharan Dubey, who took time to go beyond caste villages and found out that we are a society of not the great traditions, but society of plurality of traditions, multiplicity of great traditions, and these are dominating the cultural discourse, social dynamics of various regions. The other change was introduced with the hegemony and command of the British of our society. It began with encounters of traders and religious missionaries and got converted into a full-fledged foreign rule for nearly a century and a half, and we identify the changes introduced by the British rule as westernization. The British are gone, but the process of westernization is still an imperative, a factor, and a force in understanding social changes taking place in our society with respect to the 5 principles we just identified: class, caste, gender, ethnicity, and religion. The third force is introduced in the later years of Indian national movement and is now the main thrust of our social management, and it is democratic modernization or democratic nation building, or in simple and plain words, democratization. So, Sanskritization, Westernization, and democratization are three currents of social transformations which are informing the dynamics of our society. In these, one is propagated by culture, traditionalization or Sanskritization. The other is introduced through market forces and cultural exchanges, that is Westernization. Third is patronized and promoted by the state, and that is democratization. If you look at these three sources of these three forces, then picture becomes a little more clearer. In last 65 years, we have gone through two stages of post-colonial transformations. First stage can be identified from somewhere 1950 to 1991-92, where we had state as the pilot of transformations and market and community or culture as complementary forces. But if there was a clash between market forces and the state, or cultural dynamics and the state, obviously state was given precedence because it is based upon a modern rational force or document or testament called Constitution of India, which has been created after 3 years of debates and discussions during the transition from foreign rule to post-colonial rule. This Constitution of India has become the reference point of all the transformations which are taking place, good, bad or indifferent. And here the Constitution has suggested that the dynamics of our society has to be organized by partnership between three wings of our state: the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. The legislature is created with people's sanction through popular parliamentary contest, where variety of perspectives are presented through movements and political parties. Then choices are made. The majority is given the right to lead the process of governance, with other tendencies present in the legislative process as smaller or opposition parties. The laws are then put to practice through the executive, which is accountable to the parliament, and in case of any conflict between the laws made by the legislature and implemented by the executive, then it is referred to the judiciary for a final solution according to the principles enshrined in the Constitution of India. Now, all these 5 principles of power have been subjected to these transformations, that is coming from Sanskritization, Westernization and democratic nation building or democratic modernization in all these 65 years. But as I was suggesting, that we can understand the post-colonial period by dividing it between 2 phases, 1950 to 1991-92 and 92 to 2012. In the first period, we had a model where the state was guiding and commanding the economy in alliance with the market forces and private interests under the guidance of Planning Commission and Legislature of India. We had this period of planned development to catch up with the missed revolutions, to create new opportunities and to introduce a new dynamism in our semi-starved, semi-naked society, which was pauperized by a long period of foreign rule and slavery. After 1991-92, we have adopted a new paradigm, which is called the paradigm of liberalization, privatization and globalization, where gradually state is rolling back and market is moving forward to guide us in creating a dynamic society. In these two periods, we have experienced major changes in all 5 aspects of our power matrix. Let us look at them briefly one by one. If we start from the class perspective, in last 65 years, we have moved from a very pyramidical structure of class system with a very large bottom of landless, resourceless, daily wage based working population, with a very large proportion, nearly 3/4 living on agriculture and cottage industries, and 1/4 in urban economy and industrial sector, to a society which has a very large middle class. Practically 1/4 of our population has become a middle class by the developments and number of new changes in our economy, in our occupational structure, and this change has created a new class framework. We also have introduced a number of reforms to curtail the top of the system. As a result, there are no more Rajas and Nawabs at the top. The system of absentee landlordism is no more there. The land has been handed over to the tillers from these absentee landlords in many parts of the country. So we have created a very large class of owner cultivators who used to be otherwise tenant cultivators, and it was a major social mobility, economic mobility for the peasant India. Similarly, we have created new centers of urbanization and industrialization in last 65 years, and therefore quite a substantial part of our rural population has moved into urban centers and industrial centers. In last 20 years in particular, we have also created a new impetus for the service sector or tertiary sector of our economy, and therefore the size of population dependent upon service sector has grown from 10 to 15% on an annual basis in last 2 decades. This class transformation has made India look more and more a society led by the prominence of middle and lower middle classes and near absence of the parasitical leisure class of the colonial era. We also do not have much of presence of foreign nationals at the top of our power pyramid. Of course, India is becoming a new center of opportunities and employment for non-Indian nationals in the middle and the lower layers of our occupational structure or job market. So the role of India has become more like a magnet for not only neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Afghanistan, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, but also people from Europe, Australia, America and Africa are looking at India with new hopes and new expectations. If you look at the caste system, this has been subject to great transformation at the lower levels by the state in search of our constitutional commitment to create a society based upon triple justice, social, economic and political. As we know, caste system is based upon birth based discriminations and opportunities. A large section of caste society was kept deprived of education and employment in modern sectors, and that made India look very diseased society, paralyzed society, because of the viciousness of caste system based discriminations. We were not looking at the talent of the person, we were not giving opportunity to harness that talent, we were keeping the opportunity structure very, very confined and very rigid. To compensate centuries of this caste system based discrimination, there was acceptance of affirmative action as a responsibility of the state, what we call positive discrimination or reservation policy. So, in all schools and colleges, government offices, public sector employment and legislative system, we have introduced 7.5% reservation for the scheduled tribe people and 15% reservation for the persons belonging to the scheduled castes who were otherwise neglected, discriminated and excluded because of the caste system. This push for transforming the caste system by putting a state on the side of the discriminated has created a silent revolution in our society. Today, we also have in last 2 decades introduced affirmative action in employment and education for the other backward classes. These are people, groups and communities who were not untouchable, but they were kept confined to manual labor or service part of the agricultural economy. They were not having much access to modern channels of mobility, particularly education and employment, and therefore they were socially and educationally backward. To eliminate social and educational backwardness from our society, we have appointed commissions after commissions, and after 1989-90, the recommendations of these commissions were accepted, and this has created a new category of reservations in schools, colleges and employment centers, and that is reservation for other backward classes. It includes not only the Hindu communities, but also communities who are socially and educationally backward among the other religions, particularly the Muslims. This reservation has created a second wave of anti upper caste transformations, and this has also polarized the society into forward classes and backward classes. The consequences of agricultural and industrial changes and reservation have given great opportunities to the people belonging to the other backward classes, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in terms of elite formation. And therefore, now we have a very dynamic mobilization taking place under the patronage of the state through education, employment and political representation, and this has transformed the character of elite of Indian society. It is reflected in various walks of life, where right from the President of the Republic to the Chief Justice of India to the Speaker of the Parliament and Assembly and Chief Ministers and Chief Secretaries and entrepreneurs and professors and intellectuals, there is more and more diversity being produced, and that hegemony of certain caste, communities, classes and regions is part of the past. If you look at the caste based transformations, there are new challenges which are between the gainers and the losers, or gainers and non-gainers of the reservation system. So, on the one hand, there is a new polarization between reservation supporters and opponents. There is also further subdivision between the categories who are eligible for reservation, between those who have been successful in achieving mobility through reservation programs and policies, and those who have been left behind. There is now demand for subcategorization to create a more just impact of these reservation policies. So, among the backward classes, there is new classification of other backward classes and most backward classes, OBCs and MBCs. Similarly, among the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, there is pressure to create subcategories of Dalit and Mahadalit. Number of mobilizations are taking place among the deprived sections, and a few cases are pending in various courts in different provinces of India for rationalizing or upgrading and making the reservation program more just, more effective, and more inclusive. In any case, there is a rapid change in the character of our caste system, where the age-old handicaps are legitimate basis for new support from the state in its quest for democratic nation building, creating elite at a very large scale among those communities who have been left behind in the pre-colonial and colonial period of our modern history. The third principle of gender is subject of new contestation, and right from marriage laws to employment and political representation, there is a wave of reforms and changes to introduce new provisions to meet the challenge of gender deficit. Right from literacy to political representation, we have missing women, and we do not know what else to do except to offer them protection on behalf of the state in family, in community, in educational institutions, in labor market, and in political system of representation. Today, we have recognized that women of India are subjected to not only ideological domination around the principles of patriarchy, but direct and straight, crude and brutal violence from mother's womb to public sphere, from school and colleges to buses and trains. Women are subjected to harassment, violence, and humiliation. And in last 3 decades, we have witnessed vibrant, active, and vocal women mobilization for justice, and we have also seen growing consensus to give women a life with dignity and democratic rights. The fourth principle of our power structure is around ethnicity. More migration, more ethnicity. It has received some attention in our constitution itself, where we tried to decolonize our political geography and recognize linguistic regions as the basis for political reorganization, provincial reorganization in 1950s, the 1960s, and again in 1970s. This has created a sense of belonging, a sense of harmony, and a sense of homogeneity around linguistic identity for people all over the country. But in metro India, meaning the places where we have opportunities of education, employment, and decent life, where the population is 10 million and plus, we have people from all over the country, and they live together through the sub-principle of ethnic solidarity because of the variations of cultures, variations of languages, variations of festivals and norms. We do have a rationale for ethnic identity. This ethnic identity requires an understanding of unity in diversity as the principle of our togetherness. But everywhere we have pressure of homogenization in favor of the local, so-called son of the soil based practices, habits and priorities. So all over the country, ethnicity is becoming a basis of power and powerlessness. And this is a worrying transformation which is getting accelerated because of continuity of migration from various parts of the country to various metro points. It has also been encouraged by globalization, where the national identity or the process of national building has been rivaled by the process of globalization, and that provides a new legitimacy to ethnicity because culture becomes the first frontier of resistance to global homogeneity or mass society. We are trying to understand the problems of ethnicization through democratic discourse, but it seems that India needs to recognize ethnicity as one basic principle of social identity and power parameters. Otherwise, taking the idea of India as given and making the idea of ethnic identities as anti-national or against the spirit of nationality or nationalism will not lead us anywhere. So new negotiations are being worked out, and one of the channels is the system of political party building or creating organizations to promote ethnic interests. This has also been taken to its logical conclusion by enlarging the list of our national languages, where the languages which are overlapping in terms of their territory and region are given recognition, and that has given some sense of belonging and assurance to linguistic communities no matter where they are. The idea of ethnic solidarity has also been helped by media revolution, where practically every ethnic group has now its own presence in the cyberspace, and therefore there is no threat of homogenization or dominance of other ethnic groups by a few major ethnic groups of our country. The fifth principle, which has made an impact on our project of nation building and process of modernization in adverse ways, is the issue of religion based power configurations. India was always subjected to criticism because of the problem of multi-religiosity. We were always afraid of moving from foreign rule to some kind of communal majoritarian rule, even if we were committed to go for democracy, because democracy is a game of numbers, and if there is a religion which has many more followers than many other religions, then obviously the people of that religion will have an advantage. But fortunately for us, the secular commitment of our institutions and our political class has been so transparent and strong that in spite of several speed breakers, India has been gradually moving from the dark memories of communal violence and partition of India during 1940s to a society which has become a country with sensitivity for each other in terms of faith and communities. The martyrdom of Gandhi and the practice of religious plurality and religious tolerance of our Indian national movement has become the reference point for present day India, where competitive parliamentary process often generates temptation for vote bank politics. There are also leftovers of the historical experiences of multi-religiosity of India, where, like any other society, two or more religious groups have memories of conflict and cooperation. In times of disappointment, shortages, deprivations, the memories of conflicts of pre-colonial era become very active in dividing the present day polity into communal groups. But every communal riot has been followed by soul searching by India in general and Indian political community in particular, and every failure to keep our commitment to secularism has been used as an opportunity to reconvince ourselves and reinterrogate our problems of religious plurality. At the same time, it is true that minority communities have a number of barriers to overcome in becoming a good competitor for opportunities being provided by our power structure and our opportunity system. In recent years, the problem of minorities was interrogated by appointing a national commission to look into the changing circumstances and life setting of Muslims and other minorities of India, and it came out with a number of very strong observations about justice deficit to the people belonging to minority communities. And as a consequence, we have become aware of the shortcomings of our present pattern, which was first guided by mixed economy principle, later on through LPG paradigm, and both have been short of expectations, and therefore we need to compensate by quick catching up around religious justice or secular commitments. To summarize, India is a society which is on the move with the commitments enshrined in the Constitution for achieving the goal of self-transformation towards a society based upon social, economic and political justice through participation of people and by promoting the ideals of freedom, unity, democracy, secularism and socialism. In this journey, we have covered a long distance, and this journey has also been a factor in interrogating some of our traditional bases of power, which have been subjected to transformations through the combination of impact of our culture, our economy and our polity. Today, India can be considered as a society which is changing very democratically by looking at the 5 given principles of power, and they are class, caste, gender, ethnicity and religion. We have covered a long distance, but we have to go many more miles before we can proudly claim to be a democratic, socialist and secular society. We hope the social scientists will keep a watch on the change and the challenges, so that in the coming times we do not have to miss any of the goals which have been set for us by our founding fathers and mothers. I hope that this discussion will make you a little more understanding about the dynamics of contemporary society and people of our country. Thank you.
Okay, fine. But what the milestone we saw, we are witnessing in current time, that we have come from village to villa and local market to mall. But when we go deeper into the life of the people living in the villas and the people going to the mall, we find there are kind of disenchantment. They are seeking something and missing something. So this kind of society, villa society, apartment society that's coming up, what identity will it have, and what kind of affiliation, what kind of emotion they will extend to each other, and how a different identity of India is a tolerant society, a society which have empathy for others. Will that remain? We are going to have another benchmark for nature of a human being, natural instinct of human beings.
I think it's a very important question for us because in the freedom struggle, for example, we were guided by the spirit of patriotism and nationality. After independence, we were very clearly committed for nation building, and the idea of national unity was a basic objective in Nehru-Indira period of our country. But today we are promoting processes of liberalization, privatization and globalization. So what will keep us united, and how do we manage the inequalities which are getting promoted in the new times? Here, as a student of society, we have to recognize that there are 5 levels of our identity which are always there, but at a given point of time, some of them may be prominent and some others may become dormant, and that's where the balance is required. Every phase of our togetherness, of our society, has possibility of 5 levels of existence: locality, provinciality, nationality, regionality in civilizational terms, and then globality. Today, you are very right that the connection between the local and the global is not very easy to manage for the poor, and at the same time, the rich is feeling more and more obliged to be attending the requirements of globality and civilizational regionality. As a consequence, the poor are more attracted to certain principles of identity which are less than national, and that is promoting caste solidarities, ethnic solidarities and communal solidarities. And this is where democracy has to play a very vital role, where the process of democratic participation must make us believe that we have a common destiny and we cannot live as separate islands in spite of the differences of caste, class, gender, ethnicity and religion. And this is the process which has to be promoted by media, political parties, educational institutions, and of course cultural bodies and leaders. I think it requires a dynamic leadership and participatory system so that there is not too much to complain about deficits and exclusions. This issue of feeling of oneness or we feeling is something which is to be taken note of much more seriously today than 50 years ago, because the present generations do not have the memory of our common struggle and sacrifices to create a free India out of a foreign rule based society. So those old stories are not going to be very useful. We have to create new contract and a new compact between the rich and the poor, between the genders, between the classes, between ethnic groups, and between religious communities.
So in this scenario, those who are having the memory of the freedom struggle and they fail to maintain that. So how the new generation will inspire to coming generation, and will such values could be instilled, inculcated in new generations?
It's again something which is very serious, a challenge, and I'm very happy to draw your attention to three movements which are creating a new sense of responsibility and unity. First movement is around the idea of social justice. The women movement, the movement of the weaker sections, the movement of the minorities is underlining the centrality of the idea of social justice for our national unity. And if we have a commitment for social justice, then we will be together to respond to the problems of women, weaker sections, minorities, as well as the poor and the backward. The second movement which creates a bond between us is the movement for sustainable development. All over the country, the people in the villages and the cities are asking for offering a model which is sustainable. So whether it is in agriculture or in industry, there is a new sense of purpose, and that movement is creating new bonds around democratic participation. And the third movement, which is again creating new bonds of unity beyond political or cultural identity, is the movement to protect and harness our environment. The people of India, like other parts of the world, are becoming sensitive to the needs of protecting the nature. So our rivers, our forests, our mountains, air and soil have become common cause for the whole country, particularly for the young generation. So the idea of social justice, the idea of sustainable development, and the idea of environmental protection are the new rallying points for the people of India, particularly the younger generation.
But sometimes I wonder, as you said, that poor people are attracting toward the lifestyle or the a standard of living by rich people. Is this true, or they being forced to attract this?
I think it's partly true and partly myth. Why it is true? There is a sociological theory of reference group behavior. Okay. People are always attracted to such layers of society which are above them, who are more privileged, more affluent, more resourceful, more comfortable. That is reference group behavior, and that is the drive for change, for the betterment. But the second part is promoted by consumerism. We are sometimes guided more by market and propaganda. And this advertisement based culture, this ideology of consumerism, is the second half of this story, where the artificial needs are being promoted and introduced through market forces, and that consumerism is promoting a greed based conceptualization of our needs. So the idea of need fulfillment is something which is rational and socially appropriate idea that makes us go an extra mile, do a little more labor, save a little more money, educate our children, take care of our health, be fair to others. But the later half, which is promoted by the greed, conspicuous consumption around the ideology of consumerism, is something dangerous.
So what is the way out?
Well, the way out is some kind of new leadership where we don't leave everything to the market forces. We don't leave the greed factor to be the dominant factor unless we come back to the idea of India as a cooperative commonwealth. India as a country which needs everybody's effort for nation building, so that we are more in an egalitarian frame of mind and not so much of individualism. Then we will be remembering, while we are constructing our house, that there are millions of people who do not have any shade over their family's life. If we are engaging in conspicuous consumption, we recognize that there are nearly 1/3 of the people who are not able to earn enough to meet their basic needs, and that will make us a little more sharing and caring.
Okay. One more question I'd like to ask you: how the society action could be make more affirmative and in more participative in different walks of life? Because we find that only at the time of election they come out and vote one side or the other side, but the rest of the time they are not so much participatory in the natures.
I think it has been a problem of our political culture, which created this message that the political and social and economic system will be managed very well, provided you give responsibility to a group of people according to their program, their manifesto, their political identity. This is a wrong understanding. As it has been said from the very beginning by our freedom fighters, that liberty will require, freedom will need continuous engagement and vigilance. And this idea of giving responsibility to a select few, the political professionals or professional politicians, is an idea which needs to be revisited. We have to become active citizens. Unless we are concerned citizens, we will always have many complaints and very few people who will attend to those complaints genuinely. So this ideology of parliamentary democracy requires to be challenged and changed in favor of the ideology of participatory democracy. And this can be done institutionally by more decentralization. It began with Mahatma Gandhi's idea of Gram Swaraj. Shri Rajiv Gandhi made a very major effort through 73rd and 74th Amendment, but we have stopped there. In many provinces of India, now we are providing opportunity for women, like in Bihar, we have reservation of 50% to women, and that's a very major change for promoting women activism or active citizenship among women at the grassroots governance. But it has to go further, and we have to see that the hope that just by voting once in 5 years we will have a good system is a wrong hope. We need to have active engagement, particularly at this stage of our nation building. If we are giving 23 hours of our day to our individual needs, at least 1 hour should be given for the social questions.
So where such introspection will come from?
Well, I think there are two agencies which are supposed to give us certain space and opportunity and direction and leadership. One is media and the other is education. You know that on the question of violence against women, on the question of caste prejudices, on the question of communalism, we have used media and education fairly effectively. Now on the idea of citizenship again, we have to use education and media, because the present political elite is very comfortable with passive population. We cannot expect promotion of activism by the political elite because it doesn't suit them. Decentralization doesn't suit the present political class. But yes, it will be need of the hour, and this is where I guess we have to use our educational system and our media channels more effectively.
So such as the educational system which we have currently in use, is that suffice to explore such kind of thing, or we need a different kind of system?
I think we have already taken a good step to make participatory citizenship by recognizing right to education as one of the fundamental rights in our country. Earlier, education was more like a privilege, more for men, more for urban people, more for people with some surplus money to send their children.
What is use of it when there is no person able to teach them?
That is a challenge of planning. That is a challenge of making our priorities correct and implementable. If we have adopted right to education as our article of faith, we must do all which is possible, because uneducated or semi-educated country will remain always vulnerable to bad governance, corruption by elite, and of course domination by other cultures and societies. So it is the first requirement to make our country a nation of healthy and educated citizens. And you are very right that the present situation of primary schooling, middle schooling is very pathetic. But then once you have asked the question, I think the answer will be around the corner.
Okay, the last question I'd like to ask you, what is the scope of innovativeness in the correct educational system and media system?
I think these are two spheres of our culture and society which are influenced by the same problem these days, and that is the problem of money power, profit motive. We have to control profit motive in education so that the educational inequality can be minimized. There will be, of course, several layers of educational systems, but we must not allow money to become the primary determinant, primary divider between good and not so good education. On the other hand, in case of media, we must allow profit, but profit with a purpose. Profit with people first as mission. And I think this is where media is getting challenged by the society in terms of the missing gap or de-linking between the so-called TRP and market related priorities of the media today and the expectations of the society. I think at this point, both education and media are required to be more restrained in their search of profit so that they can become more of a partner of society in making a more healthy, prosperous and happy India.
Okay. So, well friends, with this word we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf I thank Dr. Anand Kumar for giving such an insightful lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.